Belgrade, 1456. 3 years since the fall of Constantinople and the Roman Empire. Mehmed the Conqueror and his relentless Ottoman army tore through the Balkans, driving straight toward the heart of Europe. The fate of the continent hung in the balance. While kingdoms cracked and empires crumbled, one man stood defiant on the frontier. Not a king, not an emperor, but a man who rose from the edge of obscurity to become the defender of Europe. He was not born into greatness, he seized it. Forged in the fires of battle, he became the sword and shield of Christendom, a relentless general, a cunning politician, and the last hope for Central Europe. This is the story of John Hunyadi, the wall that stood against the Crescent. History's most fascinating figures, Part 39. János Hunyadi, better known as John Hunyadi, was born around 1406 in Wallachia, or southern Transylvania, a region between Christian Europe and the rising Ottoman Empire. His family name came from the fortress of Hunyad, granted to his father, Vojk, a Wallachian noble of modest rank, by the Holy Roman Emperor and Hungarian King Sigismund of Luxembourg. This royal favor elevated the family's status, providing young John with opportunities beyond his birth. His early education came not from books, but from men of iron. First was Pippo Spano, a legendary Italian general in Sigismund's service who took young John under his wing. Then came Stefan Lazarević, the despot of Serbia, a warrior poet who taught him the code of arms and the burden of duty. These were no idle mentors, but veterans of war, their names carved into the scars of the Balkans. In the early 1430s, Hunyadi entered King Sigismund's service, fighting in the brutal campaigns of Italy and Bohemia, briefly serving under Filippo Maria Visconti, the ruthless Duke of Milan, witnessing the raw machinery of war and diplomacy. Returning to Hungary, he fought the Hussites and studied their revolutionary use of wagons as mobile fortresses, a tactic he would later master. In 1432, he married Elizabeth Szilágyi, a noblewoman from a respected Hungarian family. Together, they had 2 sons, Ladislaus and Matthias. The latter would become one of Hungary's greatest kings. On December 9th, 1437, King Sigismund of Luxembourg died, leaving Hungary leaderless in a time of peril. His son-in-law, Albert of Habsburg, inherited the crown, but his short reign collapsed under internal revolts and relentless Ottoman attacks. When Albert died suddenly in 1439, he left behind an unborn heir, Ladislaus the Posthumous, and a kingdom in chaos. Civil war erupted. Queen Elizabeth of Luxembourg fought for her son's claim, while rival nobles invited the King of Poland, Vladislaus III, to take the throne. Amid this turmoil, John Hunyadi emerged. Backing Vladislaus, Hunyadi's reputation as a hardened soldier and loyal commander earned him immense rewards. In 1440, he was named Ban of Severin, guardian of Hungary's southern frontier, the last wall between Christendom and the Ottoman tide. Among those drawn to his banner was Nicholas of Ilok, a steadfast ally whose loyalty would soon be tested on blood-soaked fields. As Hungary teetered on the brink, Hunyadi emerged as the power behind the crown. By the late 1430s, Central Europe was in chaos. The Hussite wars had left it exhausted and divided. The Holy Roman Empire was a patchwork of feuding lords. Hungary, Poland, and Bohemia were gripped by dynastic strife, and the Ottomans were at the gates. Bulgaria had fallen, Serbia had become a vassal. Constantinople, the last great bastion of the Roman Empire, was on its final legs. Seizing the moment, Sultan Murad II unleashed a new invasion into Hungary, joined by his Wallachian vassal, Vlad II Dracul, father of the infamous Vlad the Impaler. At the siege of Sendro, Ottoman and Wallachian forces pushed deep into Hungarian lands, until they met John Hunyadi. Leading a hastily assembled force of Transylvanian auxiliaries, Hunyadi struck back, crushing the invaders and driving them from the frontier, at least for now. In 1441, John Hunyadi was appointed Voivode of Transylvania, the warlord of Hungary's eastern marches, and the frontier's last line of defense. With loyal commanders like Nicholas of Ilok at his side, he struck his first major blow, defeating Ottoman forces at Semendria, modern-day Smederevo. The following year, the storm broke. In 1442, Sultan Murad II unleashed a massive invasion into Transylvania under Mezid Bey, seeking to break Hungary once and for all. As Mezid Bey approached Hermannstadt, modern-day Sibiu, Romania, Hunyadi moved with ruthless speed. When word reached Mezid that John Hunyadi was approaching, he scoffed, "Let John come. Our victory will only be the greater." It was a fatal mistake. At the Battle of Hermannstadt, Hunyadi struck like a thunderbolt. Leading a hastily rallied army of Hungarian knights and Transylvanian auxiliaries, he smashed the Ottoman lines. Mezid Bey was killed, Vlad II Dracul was forced into Hungarian vassalage, and the shattered remnants of the Ottoman force fled in chaos. But the danger was far from over. A second Ottoman army, 80,000 strong, crossed into Transylvania, determined to avenge the defeat at Hermannstadt. At the Iron Gates, a rugged gorge along the Danube River, Hunyadi sprang his trap. Outnumbered more than 4-1, he led a daring assault, shattered the Ottoman forces, and secured a stunning victory. Across Christendom, a whisper began to spread. A new champion had risen. John Hunyadi, the sword and shield of Europe, and the long campaign was coming. Following Hunyadi's triumph at the Iron Gates, on January 1st, 1443, Pope Eugene IV issued a papal bull calling for a crusade against the Ottomans. Under King Vladislaus III of Poland, Hunyadi led a crusading army of Hungarian and Polish troops, reinforced by Serbian forces under despot Juraj Branković. Their goal: drive the Ottomans out of the Balkans and cripple the Sultan's power in Europe, with John Hunyadi leading the charge. In what became known as the Long Campaign, Hunyadi unleashed a series of punishing assaults across Serbia and Bulgaria. Niš, Sofia, and key strongholds along the Morava River crumbled under his relentless advance. But winter hit like a hammer. Freezing cold, dwindling supplies, and the brutal Balkan terrain battered the Crusaders. Hunyadi led a desperate retreat, holding his army together as it clawed its way back to Hungary. Despite the hardships, the campaign was hailed as a triumph across Europe. The Ottomans had suffered their worst defeats in a generation. Humiliated, Sultan Murad II sued for peace. The Treaty of Szeged, signed in 1444, restored Serbia's independence, secured Hungary's borders, and promised a 10-year truce. For a moment, Christendom breathed easy. But behind closed doors, papal envoys urged betrayal. Victory was within reach. They insisted one final battle could end the Ottoman threat forever. And so, John Hunyadi and King Vladislaus III made a fateful choice. They would break the truce and march to war. The road to Varna had begun. In the autumn of 1444, John Hunyadi and King Vladislaus III marched east, breaking the Treaty of Szeged and gambling everything on a battle with the Ottomans. Their hopes crumbled at Varna. On November 10th, 1444, the Crusaders were trapped, pinned between the Black Sea and a far larger Ottoman force under Sultan Murad II. Their promised Venetian fleet never arrived. Despite being outnumbered nearly 2-1, Hunyadi refused to surrender. He devised a daring plan: strike the Ottoman center, hold the flanks, and break Murad's line before sheer numbers could overwhelm them. At first, it worked. Hunyadi's cavalry shattered Ottoman divisions, and for a moment, victory seemed within reach. But then, against Hunyadi's orders, King Vladislaus charged recklessly toward Murad's center, aiming for the Sultan himself. His horse was cut down, and the young king was beheaded before his stunned army. With Vladislaus dead, the Crusader lines crumbled, the battlefield dissolved into chaos. Hunyadi fought a desperate rearguard action, buying time for what was left of the army to escape. Wounded and exhausted, he fled to Wallachia, only to be captured by Vlad II Dracul. Fearing Ottoman wrath or eyeing ransom, Dracul briefly imprisoned him, but Hungarian nobles quickly forced Hunyadi's release. The crusade ended in catastrophe. Yet even in defeat, Hunyadi's legend grew. He had survived when all others had fallen, and Europe would soon need him more than ever. After the catastrophe at Varna, Hungary teetered on the brink of collapse. With Vladislav dead, the crown passed to the 4-year-old Ladislaus the Posthumous, held in the custody of his cousin, the future Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III. Hungary stood leaderless and exposed. On June 6, 1446, the estates of the realm named Hunyadi regent and governor of Hungary, but power brought enemies. he clashed with ambitious rivals like Ulrich of Celje, a noble who saw him as a low-born usurper, and John Jiskra of Brandis, a Czech warlord entrenched in Upper Hungary. Neither could be subdued, and tensions with Ulrich only deepened. Determined to secure the southern frontier, Hunyadi invaded Wallachia in 1447, deposed Vlad II Dracul, and installed a pro-Hungarian voivode. Moldavia soon followed, recognizing Hungarian supremacy. Meanwhile, in the Western Balkans, Albanian noble Skanderbeg was leading a rebellion against Ottoman rule. Sensing an opportunity to finally crush the Ottomans, Hunyadi requested Skanderbeg's aid in a crusade. In September 1448, Hunyadi led a crusading army into Serbia, aiming to join forces with Skanderbeg. But Hunyadi was betrayed by Serbian despot Đurađ Branković, who refused to join the crusade and delayed Skanderbeg's army. Facing Sultan Murad II alone at the Second Battle of Kosovo, Hunyadi's army was crushed. In the chaotic retreat, Branković captured Hunyadi, imprisoned him at Smederevo, and forced a steep ransom: 100,000 gold florins, return of Serbian lands, and Hunyadi's eldest son, Ladislaus, remain as a political hostage. Humiliated but alive, Hunyadi returned to Hungary. The sword of Christendom was battered, but not broken. The defeat at Kosovo emboldened Hunyadi's enemies. Ulrich of Celje and his allies in the royal court pounced, and the Diet forced Hunyadi to resign as Voivode of Transylvania. But Hunyadi struck back. In 1450, he seized Branković's Hungarian estates, freed his son, and rebuilt alliances with old allies like Nicholas of Ilok. By year's end, a fragile peace was brokered with Branković and Frederick III, but the situation remained volatile. In 1451, Hunyadi launched another campaign against John Jiskra of Brandis, but was defeated at the Battle of Lučenec. Sensing Hungary's weakness, the Ottomans imposed a 3-year truce. Meanwhile, Austrian and Hungarian nobles demanded that Frederick III surrender King Ladislaus V. In September 1452, he relented, delivering the young king to Ulrich. That same year, Hunyadi signed a treaty with Jiskra and sent envoys to Constantinople, pledging aid to Roman Emperor Constantine XI against the Ottomans, but negotiations collapsed. In January 1453, at the Diet of Vienna, John Hunyadi formally resigned as regent, but Ladislaus V, recognizing his worth, named him Captain General of the kingdom, granting him control of the army, key fortresses, and royal revenues. Hunyadi had lost the regency, but kept the sword. But the clock was running out, and a new disaster was about to shake Christendom to its core. On May 29, 1453, the unthinkable happened. After a brutal 55-day siege, Constantinople, the last stronghold of the Roman Empire, fell to the Ottomans. The city that had stood for over 1,000 years as the shield between Europe and the East was now under the crescent flag of Sultan Mehmed II, the 21-year-old son of Murad II. Shockwaves tore through Christendom. Panic spread. Rumors swirled of Ottoman armies ready to march on Buda or Vienna. Less than a year earlier, Hunyadi had offered aid to Emperor Constantine XI, but negotiations collapsed. When Constantinople fell, it wasn't just a defeat, it was a warning. As fear mounted, Hungary's nobles began to turn back to the one man who had faced the Ottoman storm and survived. Hunyadi moved quickly. He fortified fortresses, rallied allies, and called for unity. But his enemies weren't just Ottomans, they were at his own court. His old rival, Ulrich of Celje, now guardian of King Ladislaus V, tightened his grip on the crown. Though Hunyadi remained captain general, the court split, half for Ulrich, half for Hunyadi. Something had to break. In 1455, a fragile peace was struck. Hunyadi's youngest son, Matthias, married Ulrich's daughter, Elizabeth, a political union meant to hold the kingdom together, and for now, it worked. But while Hungary quarreled, the Ottomans advanced. In 1454, Mehmed invaded Serbia. Hunyadi led a counterattack, pushing the invaders back and retaking several key positions. Further south, Hunyadi gambled again, backing Vlad III Dracula, the exiled son of Vlad II Dracul, to reclaim Wallachia's throne. By late 1455, the writing was on the wall. Mehmed the Conqueror was coming, and Hunyadi knew the next battle would decide the fate of Europe. The target? Belgrade. The war was coming home. By the end of 1455, the signs were unmistakable. Envoys from Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik, arrived in Hungary with chilling news. Sultan Mehmed II was preparing to strike. His target was clear: Belgrade. Sitting at the crossroads of the Danube and Sava rivers, Belgrade was the key to Hungary's southern defenses. If it fell, the road to Buda and Vienna would be wide open. John Hunyadi didn't wait for permission. While nobles squabbled and King Ladislaus fled to Vienna under the pretense of a hunting trip, Hunyadi poured his personal fortune into the defense. He knew the Ottomans were coming, and he intended to meet them head-on. He reinforced the fortress with 5,000 seasoned troops under his brother-in-law Michael Szilágyi, strengthened the walls, dug trenches, and filled ditches with pitch and sulfur. Belgrade was no longer a border fortress. It was a citadel. Help came from an unexpected source. Giovanni da Capistrano, or John of Capistrano, a 69-year-old Franciscan friar and papal inquisitor, sent to Hungary to combat heresy. Instead, he became a prophet of war. He preached a crusade, declaring that the defense of Belgrade was the defense of Christendom itself, calling Hunyadi the Judah Maccabee of our time. Nearly 30,000 rallied to Capistrano's call. Peasants, craftsmen, students, monks. Most had never held a sword, but their faith was unshakable. Meanwhile, Hunyadi raised a professional army of 12,000 seasoned Hungarian, Polish, and Czech knights and cavalry, along with a fleet of 200 ships on the Danube to defend by land and water. But time was up. By June 1456, Mehmed II was on the march with 60,000 men, 300 cannons, and a fleet of warships. After crushing a Serbian relief force, he advanced on Belgrade. As the Ottoman army closed in, panic spread. Nobles fled to their castles. Foreign help never came, and the crown was silent. But the wall that stood against the Crescent was ready. John Hunyadi, voivode, crusader, and captain general, rode toward the front. The battle had begun. Belgrade, 1456. 3 years since the fall of Constantinople and the Roman Empire. Mehmed the Conqueror and his relentless Ottoman army tore through the Balkans, driving straight toward the heart of Europe. The fate of the continent hung in the balance. One man stood defiant on the frontier, not a king, not an emperor, but a man who rose from the edge of obscurity to become the defender of Europe. He was not born into greatness, he seized it. The wall that stood against the Crescent, John Hunyadi. On July 2nd, 1456, Ottoman war banners appeared on the horizon. The Sultan had arrived. With over 60,000 men, 300 cannons, and a powerful war fleet, Mehmed II surrounded Belgrade by land and water. The bombardment began on July 4th. Day and night, Ottoman guns hammered the walls as infantry assaults crashed against the defenses. Michael Szilágyi and his garrison held firm, while Giovanni da Capistrano rallied the people. But Hunyadi remained across the river, waiting for his moment. On July 14th, Hunyadi made his move. With a fleet of 200 ships, he launched a daring naval assault. After 5 brutal hours, the Ottoman blockade was shattered. 3 galleys sunk and dozens of ships were captured. Hunyadi sailed into Belgrade with 3,000 reinforcements and supplies. The garrison roared. The tide had turned. Enraged, Mehmed doubled the bombardment. On July 21st, the Ottomans launched a full-scale assault. The Janissaries, the Sultan's elite slave infantry corps, stormed the lower town. Fighting erupted in the streets. When they reached the moat, Hunyadi ordered it set ablaze, turning it into an inferno, trapping hundreds of Janissaries who were slaughtered. The next day, a band of Crusader peasants defied orders, slipping outside the walls to harass Ottoman troops. The 70-year-old Capistrano tried to stop them, but soon found himself surrounded by over 2,000 men. He cried out, "The Lord who began this work will finish it!" And they charged. Hunyadi seized the moment, leading a thunderous cavalry charge straight into the Ottoman camp, capturing cannons and smashing through the center. Mehmed himself rode into the melee, cutting down several attackers before being wounded and knocked unconscious. The Janissaries rallied briefly, but morale collapsed. That night, Mehmed ordered a retreat. On July 23rd, Hunyadi and his men entered the abandoned Ottoman camp. Against all odds, Belgrade had held. John Hunyadi, The wall that stood against the Crescent had turned back the tide. The victory at Belgrade echoed across the continent. John Hunyadi had stopped the Ottomans and was hailed across Christendom as the savior of Europe. Celebrations erupted from Venice to Oxford. Pope Calixtus III declared Hunyadi Athleta Christi, champion of Christ, calling him the most outstanding man the world had seen in 300 years. By papal order, church bells were to ring at noon to honor the triumph at Belgrade, a tradition still kept by many churches today. But celebration turned to sorrow. In the days following the siege, plague swept through the Crusader camps. Weakened by exhaustion and wounds, John Hunyadi fell ill. On August 11th, 1456, just weeks after his greatest triumph, 49-year-old John Hunyadi died near Zimoni, modern-day Zimun, Serbia, and was buried in St. Michael's Cathedral in Alba Iulia, Romania. Hungary and Europe mourned their hero. Even his enemies paid tribute. Sultan Mehmed II said, "Although he was my enemy, I feel grief over his death, because the world has never seen such a man." John Hunyadi was not born to a crown or a throne. He was not born into greatness, he seized it. From the edge of obscurity, he rose to become the sword and shield of Christendom, the last hope of a continent, the wall that stood when kings and emperors faltered. He fought not for glory, but for survival, not for ambition, but for his people. And when the storm came, it was Hunyadi who stood alone. Though death claimed him, his victory endured. Though his voice fell silent, his legacy thundered on. For from his house, a raven would rise, Matthias Corvinus, his son, the king who would carry the Hunyadi banner into the next chapter of Hungary's destiny. But before the son, there was the father. Before the legend, there was the man, John Hunyadi, the wall that stood against the Crescent. As always, don't forget to like and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow, allowing us to bring you even more incredible stories. If you enjoyed this video, we release new episodes weekly, so click the bell icon so you never miss a future video. This is UnRecalled History. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.